All right, YouTube subscribers, working my way through some Mailbag Monday here, some comments, some feedback on the channel and the blog. And this vlog, Fritz, what systems, what games are you involved playing, both on the Wargaming side and maybe the board gaming side, role-playing game? What is fueling Wargamer Fritz? I'm kind of condensing it down here. So I started out with Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, playing with a bunch of friends, running some really big dungeons, and one of our friends, Marcus, he was going back to Brazil at the end of the summer. So this was a number of years ago, so of course we were never going to see him again, and he wanted to have this epic adventure. The entire summer, we were going to level up. I was the DM, my buddy Naps, my buddy Dom, my buddy Miguel was playing, and they were just going to level up, and then at the end of the summer, we were going to confront Tiamat. Now, they knew this ahead of time. Marcus wanted to go out big. So in AD&D, Tiamat is the bomb. So we'll do that. We'll go up against Tiamat. So all summer we play, all summer we level up, and we're getting ready for that final adventure. So we cut out a bunch of cardboard and make some dungeon tiles, and we start purchasing some metal miniatures to go with it, because we were kind of going to go crazy, and we got a metal dragon and kind of drew and sculpted some other heads to make it look like Tiamat on there. And this was the first introduction to kind of like miniatures and miniature wargaming. There was this store on Central Avenue, Dragon's Den, that sold miniatures and other role-playing products and things like that. So we would spend more and more time in there. And I remember looking at Warhammer Fantasy. This was first edition, kind of the 3 books there, and understanding it was a miniature combat game. But in my mind, I was like, well, I kind of got AD&D. Now we're diving into miniatures. On a side note, the entire party got destroyed, except for Dom, his thief, just booked it out of there. Marcus spent the entire summer collecting various dragon scales and dragon suits, so he made this suit of chromatic armor that essentially protected him from the various breath weapons of Tiamat. And he had some magic resistance and things like that. But Tiamat grabbed him and basically ripped one of his arms off, and now that it messed up his armor and just totally annihilated him. And at the end of the adventure, just everyone's just beaten and blasted. And Marcus was like, this is the most amazing experience ever. So he leaves to go to Brazil. We're collecting more and more miniatures, my friend Dom and Naps and Miguel. And we're there at Dragon's Den, and he goes, hey, Fritz, check this out. Orcs with guns. And I'm like, orcs with guns? That makes 0 sense. That's just crazy. And they're up on the shelf. So we wandered into the Rogue Trader section, the Warhammer section. They're up on the shelf is 40K. And we see that. And you got the rhinos and you got the Space Marines. And in that moment, maybe you guys have been there, kind of the basement battle reports. In that moment when you're starting a new system, we saw this a little bit with Drop Zone Commander for a little while. You got to get your faction in fast. You need to make that split-second decision immediately. And Naps was like, boom, Space Marines. Miguel, he still hasn't forgiven us. He's like, squats. I'm like, looking through the book, I'll do these Eldar guys because they're like pirates on there, jumping into Eldar. And that pushed into 40K. That carries out through today. Now, certainly I don't play Warhammer 40,000 for the rules because they are, well, they're Games Workshop. There's been a couple of things that have been innovative over the years. There's a lot of things I like, a lot of things I dislike on there, a lot of rules where you really can't make sense of anything. But ultimately, it is what keeps me involved in 40K. Certainly the models and the diversity of armies and the kits that Games Workshop puts out. But to be able to jump into that narrative, I often wonder now I still play D&D, I still love AD&D, I often wonder, because that was my first exposure to gaming and that narrative, and in your mind, seeing it, if I jumped into a war game that didn't have the background narrative that 40K did, would it have captured my mind and my soul as much? So the rich narrative of 40K, to be able to play that, to be able to read those books and create something on the tabletop, it's like a living RPG. And of course, that opens up the 40K community, all of you and myself playing these games, discussing and tactics and conversions and everything, just really the narrative and the community on there. So that's been propelling me through 40K. At the same time, I got started with Battletech on there. Now, early on, Battletech, I would play with Naps. We really didn't get very far because Battletech is the type of game that It has a lot of rules, nuances to it, and the flow of it might be a little bit challenging to understand. It helps if you have someone to introduce it. Now, the new box sets from Catalyst, they do a great job, and certainly YouTube kind of solves that problem because you can watch games and see how they're played. But if you were jumping in straight into one of the older box sets, the BattleTech, the CityTech, the Aerotech, it was a little more challenging. BattleTech also takes a little while to play. So we played it, but not always regularly, or not to the extent, certainly the extent I play BattleTech today. So we've got that going on. I'm playing 40K, I'm playing BattleTech. Through another friend, I got introduced to historical wargaming, Napoleonics, Ancients. And what was interesting is the group that I was with, they were much, much older than me at the time. We're talking like 15, 20, 30 years difference. So the level of maturity was so high. And because they were historical wargamers, this also set the tone, which bleeds into 40K. This set the tone in that everything on the table was painted. I didn't even know miniatures were unpainted. All their stuff is painted. All the tables look exactly like the battlefield you were trying to recreate. Next to each table on the left and right side, you had side tables for your dice and your rules and tape measures. You didn't leave dice on the table. You didn't even roll on the table. You didn't put your tape or your rules or your food or your drink on the table. Like, this was a real battlefield. And as we were playing, you would compare the historical notes turn by turn and see it. And I've always enjoyed history, and certainly some of the battles were interesting on there, even though primarily I consider myself a sci-fi or a futuristic wargamer. But this really set the tone where, wow, I noticed, and again, this role-playing influence, there would be times that I was playing. This is where I first noticed it. There would be times where I'd be playing, and I'd step back because it's not my turn, or I moved kind of the companies under my command, and it's like a movie. It's like we've created something on the tabletop. I mean, we're having a great time, but we're creating some sort of simulation or something on the tabletop. So at this point, I'd say I was playing mostly BattleTech, mostly 40K, and a little side dish here and there of Ancients every now and then on Invite. So then we start getting into Wings of Glory. And this is World War I. This is World War II. This is the flight path system that later evolved into X-Wing miniatures on there. And what I really liked about Wings of Glory World War I, first of all, everything was pre-painted. Second of all, the mechanics were very elegant in that you had to plan your moves out 3 times ahead based on the speed of the planes. And the rules could be really simple, where you just go head-to-head, or you could expand upon them where you have altitude, where you have special damage effects, where you have pilot skills. So it was the first time that I really played a wargaming system that started off really, really easy, as in a good way, and could expand up and up. And I love Wings of Glory also because it's approachable by anyone and everybody. I still don't play enough Wings of Glory. Well, all the wargaming systems I play, I don't get to play enough. I need to spend like hours and hours each week playing all of them on there. But Wings of Glory is something that anyone can approach and play. So I started to bring that to the gaming club because I wanted to play more Wings of Glory. And at that point, it picked up. We had a nice little group going. Then Fantasy Flight comes out with X-Wing miniatures. Now, I'm going to be honest. I mean no disrespect here. It's interesting because when I play Warhammer 40,000, I'm so immersed in the narrative that sometimes it's very hard. I mean, these are completely self-imposed limitations in my head. It's a little bit hard to build WAC, W-A-A-C, win at all cost lists, because I read the Black Library books, I read the narrative that Games Workshop puts out, I try and build my lists around that. I mean, we see this with my Samhan Warhost, we see this with my Cornate Glory, Berserkers of Scalathrax list, we see it with my Black Templar list on there. Necrons, I'm a little bit more freeform, but I try to capture that on the tabletop. When I got to X-Wing miniatures, it's like, yeah, okay, I know Star Wars. Who doesn't? It's in our culture's DNA. And no disrespect, I really couldn't care less about Star Wars. I mean, in terms of the narrative and if it's in the books versus the movies and the canon and like all this stuff on there. So it was interesting to approach X-Wing and I've never done this with any other gaming system. And I've been a beast at playing X-Wing in that I'll just put together a dirty list. I'll just put together a whack list on there, win at all cost. I'll just break every canon rule that's out there and go competitive from it. That's not to say I don't build narrative lists. That's not to say I don't like big games, but it was an interesting break tactically for me because I didn't have this emotional baggage, this self-imposed baggage to jump into X-Wing. So we launched the X-Wing group at the club a number of years back. This was literally like 2 weeks after it came out, because what interested me was that it was built off Wings of Glory, which is an amazing game. It's pre-painted, so pop the ship out and play it. Side note, for some reason I can paint miniatures, but I just can't paint X-Wing ships. Every time I've tried it, it just looks awful. And third, and I was correct on this, I called this and I was correct on it, I thought, this is a great game that anyone will pick up and play immediately because it is Star Wars. 40K, you're kind of over to the side. There's 4 or 5 tables. People are interested in it, but it's like, wait, Space Marines, spiky Space Marines, Space Elves, Space Robots, Space Bugs, like all this type of stuff. It's a lot to take in. Other historical war games, it's like, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool, but that's like old stuff. Like, I don't know, Roman soldiers and knights and things. But X-Wing miniatures, it sells itself. It's a license to print money on there. So I figured if I jump into this system, it'll be really easy to show up and get a game, because literally if I just show up anywhere that there's hobbies, someone's going to be rolling with it. And also, I was getting a little bit burned out on 40K tournaments at the time. So moving ahead, I'm like, I'll do the X-Wing tournaments. It worked out well. And I had a really great time playing it. I knew at some point, I'm kind of 50-50 right now with X-Wing. I knew at some point Fantasy Flight was going to pull what it always pulls. Right in the middle, cut it off, announce 2.0 because we're fixing the rules or we're going to do this and that. We're like, no. You're forcing all of us to buy all new stuff. And rather than tightening up the rules, you're just going to force everyone to buy new stuff. I mean, 90% of their catalog is first edition, second edition, third edition games. Now, in their defense, when they do roll out a new edition, there is a lot of innovation. There is a lot of really new, great stuff to it. But it essentially flushes the rest of your collection. Okay, yeah, there's conversion kits, but how big is your collection on there? Especially if it's a war game, especially if you're a competitive player. They really screwed over a lot of people there. I've been slowly getting back into X-Wing. I swore it off, said I wasn't going to do it, but that was just a stopgap because I was a little bit pissed for a while. And I enjoy the game. I enjoy the community. So I am slowly converting stuff over. I'm slowly looking at the meta on there, and I'm pushing back into it. But my reason for being involved in X-Wing still stands. I can show up anywhere, anytime, any place, and play X-Wing and get a game in. So doing Battletech, doing 40K, doing X-Wing. My friend Dave, who's an awesome Wargamer, we hang out and play a lot of Battletech and stuff. He gets involved in Chain of Command. He's a big fan of Spanish Civil War, that time period, and he's a perfectionist. He's an amazing guy, painting, modeling, building. So he starts making this amazing terrain. He's got these miniatures. I'll play it. We'll do Spanish Civil War. We have a lot of fun playing that. And I begin to realize the rule systems for Chain of Command are amazing. It really is. It's got a lot of innovation. It's got a lot of great stuff. Out of all the systems I enjoy, it is easily the best rule set for that narrative on there. And they have Chain of Command World War II. So we jump into that. And I found that really interesting because any type of historical wargaming that I played, it was Romans. I've got my DBA Romans, version 1, version 2 on there. Napoleonics, okay, maybe Wings of Glory, World War I, historical, but never jumping into World War II on there. So it was interesting having to learn, or I should say relearn, my history, early war, late war, mid-war, different aspects of it. And what got me really intrigued by Chain of Command was that, yes, in the narrative of it, these are professional soldiers, but coming from 40K and playing Space Marines, where I can command my Space Marines, by moving them or whatever, to run up that hill. They'll do it. They'll take losses. They'll run up that hill or whatever. chain of command, you run up the hill, you start getting shot at, you start taking shock, your units break, they run, they're pinned, they don't listen, it's just chaos. Like, it has this feel of you are really commanding normal people. You are not commanding superhuman space marines on there. So, wow, what an amazing difference exploring and playing that perspective. Now, on the board gaming side, I tend to play fantasy. This was D&D. You know, this is the holy grail of everything. You play Dungeons and Dragons, or I should say role-playing games. And from there, of course, there's a lot of prep time. It's a big adventure. It takes things... Hey, if only there was a board game that we could kind of condense that down into 60 to 90 minutes, we're in. So I love playing a lot of dungeon crawlers. I love a lot of card games on there. Lord of the Rings, card game, Pathfinder, Dark Souls, Conan the board game, crazy stuff like Xenoshift, which is absolutely really, really challenging. Claustrophobia, Zia, Arkham Horror, Talisman, all that type of stuff. Mage Knight. Okay, well, I'm still learning how to play Mage Knight. I don't even know if I'm playing Mage Knight correctly. I got to hook up with somebody to show me how to play Mage Knight. I like the idea of Mage Knight on there. Has anyone ever played Mage Knight successfully? But a lot of the board gaming is more, not so much strategy. I mean, I played Euros heavily with a bunch of guys and things like that. Zombicide Black Plague, need to definitely mention that. But when I play Euros, it just feels like I'm back at work, like managing resources and doing this type of stuff. So my board games tend to go to the extreme of, I want random dice chucking narratives on there and just let's see what happens. Let's have some fun. We'll try to do some tactics, but I just want to kind of kick back and do something a little less serious than wargaming and have some fun and see what we can do. So playing on that side and going through there. Coming around full circle to the role-playing side, play AD&D, play 3.0, 3.x, 4.0, which I actually really liked. I'll admit that. D&D Next, D&D 5, whatever the heck we're calling it now. It's okay. I would say my heart is with AD&D. I love Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, but that's really challenging to get people to play because one is really lethal. I mean, you get just fragged so easy. Combat will take you out regardless of your, quote, level on there. And the narrative, it's a little bit of the challenge of Warhammer 40,000. It has such a rich narrative where you need to really be immersed and know it. Like, why should I be scared of beastmen? Why is there this idea of chaos? Why is there this idea of corruption on there? So having to learn that narrative, I find, only allows it to be played a few times a year. Paranoia. I love Paranoia. I've got a Paranoia group. We play it once or twice a year on there. Get together on a Saturday, play it. Would love to play more, but that takes its own mindset too. And then on the Wargamer miniature side, the Mordheim crew, play that 2 or 3 times a year. I run Possessed. I've got Dwarven Treasure Hunters on there. We've got an amazing table to do it, and in our spare time we just kind of add more and more stuff on there. I really would love GW to bring back that aspect, but I know that's really not going to happen with their Age of Sigmar. I mean, it's amazing we've got Warhammer Quest Blackstone Fortress. It's amazing we've got Quest Silver Tower. They're not going to go in that direction, but that's okay. We've got the legacy aspects of it. So that is what I'm playing. That is what I continue to play and evolve in the hobby and just see where this crazy stuff will take us.